Hey, why Americans no longer trust the system. Welcome back once again to another episode of Common Ground Conversations. I'm your host, Todd, where we just have a conversation about what's happening in the world of politics. This is straight down the middle. I don't choose a side. I tell you how I see it, just here to lay out the facts as I see them. So let's get started. The question nobody wants to answer is this. There are certain questions in America that immediately start arguments. Questions about politics, questions about the media, questions about elections, questions about protests and riots. But sometimes the most important questions are the ones that make people uncomfortable. Here's one of them. Should the same standards apply to everyone? So you tell me this. Should they or should they not? I'm thinking they probably should apply to everybody. But if you look at the left and ask them, they will say yes, but yet their actions are different. If you ask the right, they'll say yes, but their actions are different. At first glance, most Americans would answer yes. Of course, they should. Justice should be blind. The law should apply equally. Our politicians say so, but their actions say a complete different story, just like I mentioned. Violence should be condemned regardless of who commits it. But if you look on the news and if you look on the social media platforms and you see all the violence, you see somebody saying, no, I don't see violence here, and yet it's happening right behind them on the screen, or they just don't condone it or condemn it. They don't say anything about it. They just keep their mouths shut. Violence should be condemned regardless who commits it. Most people agree with those principles that it should be done, that it should not be allowed. The disagreement, however, begins when we start looking at specific events. What about our government? You have special people in Washington who march to their own drum. In other words, they think that they can do one thing and get away with it. Is that right or is that wrong? We put them in power. We voted them in. We should be able to decide whether what they're doing is right or wrong. Take the riots that occurred across America in the 2020s. Many protests were peaceful. Millions of Americans exercised their constitutional right to assemble and make their voices heard. Okay, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to protest. You're not allowed to harm anybody. You're not allowed to hurt somebody. You're not allowed to be violent when you protest. Okay? But there were also riots that happened during that time frame that came out of some of these protests. Business were destroyed. People damaged businesses. Communities were destroyed. Police officers were attacked. Lives were disrupted. Many Americans watched those events unfold and wondered why some of our leaders seemed reluctantly or strongly to condemn the violence. Our leaders that we voted for. And to this day, they still continue to turn a blind eye. You tell me, is that right or wrong? Look at the protesting going on now. You can't tell me that those are peaceful protests. You have people pushing back against the police, people getting arrested, but yet our politicians are doing or saying nothing. Why? Tell me why. Why is this happening? Because we have one side saying nothing and the other side saying something. The other side, one side is saying there's nothing to see here. while the other side is saying, yes, there's plenty to see here, and they're showing it on TV. You tell me. Then came January 6, 2021. Americans watched protesters breach the Capitol during the certification of the presidential elections. Police officers were assaulted, property was damaged, the certification process was interrupted. Was this right? No. One side condemned it, one side didn't. You still hear about this, as a matter of fact. They're still talking about this to this day. You may not have liked who just won the presidency, but you have to respect the process. Right or wrong as it may be, you still have to accept the process and how it turned out. There's right ways and wrong ways to do it. Protest the correct way. For many Americans, this crossed the line that should never have been crossed. But yet, Americans took it into their own hands. They wanted to seek justice. So they marched on the Capitol. The events of both periods generated strong reactions, but they also generated another question. Why do some people seem willing to excuse bad behavior when it comes from their side, and while condemning it when it comes from the other side? So when the same thing comes from one side and the same thing comes from the other side, they'll condemn it on one side and they won't on the other side. They will be quiet. There'll be crickets on the other side. The question is not directed at the Democrats and it's not directed at the Republicans. It is directed at all of us. We need to grow up, people. This is sad news. This is sad. There should be none of this violence going on. Nobody says you can't protest. Nobody's saying you cannot view your opinion. You cannot, nobody's saying you can't tell people what's right or wrong. One of the things we can do, however, is to go ahead and vote in the right people. You don't like something, vote in the correct people. Is it right to sit there and pack the courts? No, it's not. Just because one side wants to do it so they think they can control the state and the government, no, it's not right. There should be a bill or something that says this is as far or this is as many court or justices that you're allowed to have in there. Right now, there is no law that says you can only have X amount of judges in there. There should only be a certain amount of judges, and it should be an odd number of judges so that there always can be a tiebreaker. So, is it better than one than the other? No, it's not. Because politician tribalism has become one of the most powerful forces in modern history. I also believe many Americans feel entitled. This is what I believe makes me think they can go out and destroy someone else's property. So there are a lot of people out there, and again, you see it on social media over and over. People sitting there thinking that they're entitled, so they'll go out there and destroy somebody's property. But yet, nothing happens to them, or they feel that nothing should happen to them. You have too much of this going on. I spoke in one or two of my first um, podcasts, and this was before it became videos, about racism, Martin Luther King's racism. This is a problem. This is a big problem. People feeling entitled. Too often, people evaluate events based on who was involved rather than who was actually or what is actually happening. So that becomes a problem. People need to actually start listening to what is being said and not who said it. If people could just read the message instead of seeing who said the message or who wrote the message, I believe we'd be better off. So if people could just kind of like close their eyes when the message is being said by whoever, and hopefully they don't know who is saying it, they could then say, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good message. They would be better off. But instead, then you have the one side or the other saying, well, so and so said this, so we should probably not do that. And then you have the fighting and the bickering. If the politicians would just shut their yap and let the Americans form their own opinions about something, then things would be better off as well. But instead, the politicians have to open their yaps and start pushing things down the Americans' throats. Then this becomes the problem and this becomes the issue. If our principles change depending on what political teams benefit, then they are not principles at all. They are preferences. So a nation cannot function for a long time or for long portions of its population as long as its population believes there is a different rules for different people. The louder voice seems to come out on top, and it's been this way for many cases. Trust begins to disappear. Confidence in institution declines. Citizens become more cynical. Families break apart. Hate is more prevalent. You see this all the time. You see it on the news. You see it on social media. You see it all over the place. You see some of the newscasters or some of the shock or talk show hosts that are one-sided or the other, and they pick a side, and so then they talk the loudest, and they pick that one side. Whether it's true, right or wrong, you be the judge. Eventually, people stop believing they will receive equal treatment under the law. And that's when people start taking the law into their own hands. Whether that perception is entirely accurate is almost besides the point. The perception itself creates damage. This is why consistency matters. If violence is wrong, it is wrong regardless of the cause. If attacking police officers is wrong, it is wrong regardless of the political movement or involvement. If leaders use irresponsible rhetoric, it should concern us all, regardless of our party affiliation. If Democrats and Republicans need to step up, the Democrats and Republicans need to step up and start condemning the wrong. Become the leaders you were elected to be. We need to stop this. This is really getting out of hand. People need to just kind of come to the plate and come together. We need to stop the division. Whoever is in charge of the House or whatever, those people need to, Johnson needs to come to the House and stop the division and start coming together. Public, those leaders that are out there need to come together and start talking, communicate, not point fingers, because when you point that one finger, you still have three fingers coming back at you. Not the complainers. The standard should not change. The jersey should not matter. The principle should. America has survived many different disagreements throughout its history. We've had disagreements since we were formed, and we will continue to have disagreements, and that's fine. That keeps us strong. That keeps us going forward and moving forward. It can survive today's disagreement as well, but it requires something people are reluctant to do. One of them is to communicate. It requires being willing to hold our own side accountable. That means the Republicans need to hold their side accountable and the Democrats need to hold their side accountable. We need to hold each other accountable. It requires us all to come to the table and have that conversation as well. Not just the other side, but both sides. We are lacking communication. The real question facing America today may not be who was right or wrong. The real question may be whether we still have the courage to apply the same standards to everyone. And and if we don't, what happens next? Who can we trust? You all have heard the saying, how can you tell when a politician is lying? When his lips are moving. We need to somehow change that. I mean, after all, we voted them in, we can vote them out. That is the only way the whole can be accountable. We have to vote them out if we don't trust them anymore. We have to move them out. Stop, stop, stop listening to what they're saying and stop hearing what and start hearing what they're saying. So there's a difference. Start actually hearing what they're saying and really understand, like, okay, this is what they're saying. I should not probably abide to what they're saying. Change that attitude because your kids are growing up into that. The next generation, we have to hand the reins over to that next generation. Do you want to do it the way it's going right now? So thank you for listening. If you like what you're hearing, then click the like button and share with family and friends, as well as subscribe below. I hope you all have an outstanding day. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode.